In the penultimate episode of Yellowjackets season 3, multiple people die, but unfortunately, like most of the deaths, they feel more like speed bumps to kind of create some form of inconvenience to the surviving Yellowjackets than something that's meaningful, big, and notable. Starting in the past, as we always do. When it comes to what to do with Cody and Hannah, there's kind of a split feeling about it. As we saw in the last episode, Shauna, Taissa, Lottie, they want to stay in the wilderness, and Shauna uses her influence in order to kind of coerce everybody to stay. As you can imagine, a lot of people aren't happy about this. Mari isn't, Natalie and a few others. Travis also being kind of a double agent and having these feelings, but what can they really do? At this point, Shauna has the gun. She's clearly off her rocker, and while Travis tries to kill Lottie through the pit, because he's the one who designed the pit that Pitco falls in, Lottie, when he tries to get her onto the trap and die, she just walks right on it and seemingly seems protected by the wilderness. So with that, it's hard to say between maybe his faith being renewed or realizing that he's helpless where Travis is by the end of this episode. What is clear, though, is that Natalie is willing to betray the others, not everybody, but at least Shauna, Taissa, and them, and get a handful of them off the civilization and maybe call for help. And if that means hoping, praying that Cody won't betray them, they're willing to do it. So when Hannah is going to the bathroom, Natalie slips her a knife, and the hope was that Hannah would get herself free, get Cody free, meet up with them, and then off they would go. Unfortunately for Natalie, what ends up happening is Hannah gets herself free. She mentions a question regarding whether or not Cody's name is really his name based off of a knapsack, and seemingly she decides to, instead of go with Natalie, run away, get back to civilization within about a week, she stabs Cody in the eye, claims she wants to join the Yellowjackets, and with that, you get to understand how she got to live for a little bit while longer. Now, unfortunately for Natalie, this kind of breaks her in a way that Travis got broken in terms of not being sure what's really next. But one thing she discovers while she's kind of in mourning is Misty running through the forest, and she sees that Misty has the plane's original transponder, and she's trying to work it with the one that Cody had in order to speak to outside civilization. And with that, Natalie may have some form of hope, while she's probably wanting to beat the hell out of Misty. Getting to modern times, despite just seeing Van cough up blood and seemingly on her deathbed, her younger version visits her, and next thing we know, Van is able to move around, get into a car without much issues, and go with Taissa and Misty down to where Melissa lives. And to much surprise, despite what we saw with Shauna and Melissa in the last episode, Melissa's able to get away, but because her car tank was empty, she gets stuck on the road and gets picked up by Taissa, Van, and Misty, who, of course, like Shauna, are very much surprised she's alive, but that's all set aside as they get back to Melissa's house, and once again, there's a confrontation. One that, as we've seen multiple times, deals with Shauna's paranoia about how people are out to get her, and Misty outright says when it comes to the freezer, that was her, but not directly. The lock has been broken for ages, and she just didn't tell Shauna because Shauna was being mean to her. So when it comes to that situation, she was right, it was Misty. But as for the stalking, the brake cutting, Melissa's still not admitting to that, and so that mystery continues. But while Van kind of goes out to take a breather, and Misty, because she needs more evidence because all of her current ones keep leaving the dead ends, she goes off to see Walter, which leaves Taissa, Shauna, and Van along with Melissa, who they of course tied up. But unfortunately for them, while Van is outside getting a breather, Taissa and Shauna are trying to figure out what to do, and Melissa closes up the fireplace hole so that all of them eventually end up either knocked out in the case of Shauna and Taissa, or if in Melissa's case, she's just barely hanging on. And while this happens, Misty's with Walter, trying to get a hold of what data he has on Lottie's phone in order to possibly put something together. And it seems by her last scene in the episode, she discovers something. But unfortunately, while she's making that discovery, Van finds herself having to save Sean and having to save Taissa. And then when she goes for Melissa, those two end up in a tussle because Van is trying to think to herself, should she kill Melissa out of the belief that maybe the wilderness will keep her alive? But unfortunately for Van, she doesn't have it in her, but Melissa does, so Melissa ends up killing Van. Meanwhile, Taissa, of course, is crying over her while Melissa gets away, and we're left to question, because Taissa had a moment when she was wrestling with Dark Taissa, if maybe Dark Taissa finally regained control, or if regular old Taissa is still very much present and still directing things. So getting to the review section, really, I hate how when it comes to the adult characters, anytime somebody dies, it feels more like a mercy killing than like a major event. When it came to Natalie, her dying felt like a mercy killing because it seemed like she was just going through loops and she wasn't really going anywhere forward. With Lottie dying, it felt like a mercy killing for the sake of the show because they needed a mystery that was worth paying attention to. When it comes to Van dying, I mean, what else was going to happen? Never mind, it gives a boost to Taissa, who's badly in need of having one because she's become such a dull and disappointing character. But while there's a lot of negatives in terms of Van dying and it not really feeling as impactful as it should be, at the very least now we can look at Melissa and say that we got a proper villain that actually is formidable and notable. Because Melissa, with her believing in the wilderness, with her having the ability to take on Sean and kind of match her a bit, it means that now there is a serious threat. And while it isn't clear if Melissa did stalk Shauna, did cut her brakes or anything like that, at the very least, we know that she's capable of doing that. And even though she kind of left her family behind, so now Alex is kind of a trump card or pawn or whatever, it makes it so that interesting things can happen in the present day, which isn't often available to us. With that said, though, I have to admit, I was kind of peeved that Misty's discovery from Lottie's phone is being held off to the season finale just because I feel like we needed a serious pop and not just Van getting killed. Never mind, when it comes to Hannah killing Cody, it just feels like another way to kind of show how and why they stayed in the wilderness so long. And while I get it, explanations are very important, at the same time, I'm really desiring a time jump in the past because I need season 4 to just be about them readjusting to civilization, because the past is starting to slowly but surely lose its luster as it's starting to drag things out, and I'm afraid that it'll eventually just bottom out, and then we have to hope that maybe if this reaches season 5, it could actually do something that kind of re-energizes the base of this entire show. But overall, when it comes to this episode of Yellowjackets, it's not one that necessarily gets me excited for the finale, but at the same time, low expectations could lead to high rewards, so maybe this could do something that has been long necessary but hasn't really been done.